Hey folks, and welcome to the seance room. Now this seance room is very special. It's where I communicate with the dearly departed and talk about everything and anything paranormal under the sky. So with that being said, please come and join us on Miss Hyde's sofa for another episode of Miss Hyde's Paranormal World. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you later. Hey guys, welcome back to Miss Hyde's Paranormal World. Yes. Before I start getting any bitches and complaining, I upgraded the status of the podcast to explicit because I got tired of trying to catch my F-bombs, so I will drop F-bombs now and any other cuss word, English or Spanish. So fair warning, if you don't want to hear that kind of stuff, then this is not a podcast for you. Number 2, I rebranded my podcast. But the paranormal was really cool, but I wanted something shorter, and Miss Hyde's Paranormal World is 3 words, and it's a lot easier that way. But our email address still stays the same, our social media still stays the same, everything else stays the same. It's just name of the podcast that changed. Okay, so with that shit done, I also wanted to let you all know that I've hit the 1,320 mark of plays. So I am in great awe because that, I wanted to hit 1,500 plays by December 31st. So it may look like I may be hitting that soon. But then again, I want to say thank you to all new listeners, old listeners, and everybody who follows me, who comments, who shares, who likes the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. We do have a website dedicated just to the podcast. I'm going to link it in the description box, so check that out. Also, I believe through the link through the website, you can also donate. I'll have to double check with that if you would like to donate. And you could also donate through Anchor if you would like to do that. No one is forcing anybody to donate. Please do not feel obligated. We are in COVID time, and I don't want anybody to donate and make them feel like they have to. Again, any donations are greatly appreciated. It'll help with the podcast in the future. And maybe it'll help me get actually a good setup going. Like a soundproof and a really good mic. So I don't have to be using my cell phone. But I like my cell phone. So, yeah. All right. So all the bullshit news is done. Let's get into our Halloween episode. So, have you ever wanted to visit perhaps a scary location? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about a couple locations. Now, you can't escape asylums nor prisons. All right, so we all know that asylums and prisons are historically cruel and tragic locations. That's a given, okay? They are, prisoners and patients abused, mentally ill, the violent, and everything else that society deems not normal and too difficult to handle, were sent to these locations. So it's kind of sad to be honest, that, just because you were bipolar, back in the day, they sent you there to get fixed, and you'd end up getting a lobotomy, and you ended up being more fucked up than you were really fucked up. So, we are going to spend our time back in 1864. Now, we're going to talk about this really cool lunatic asylum in West Virginia. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, we're talking about the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum of West Virginia. Now, again, this asylum opened in 1864. It was a massive, and I mean massive, rambling stone structure. Now, it was under construction until 1881. So do the math. It technically opened in 1864, but it wasn't finished completely until 1881, and yet accepted patients. Now, the building contains 2.5 miles worth of corridors, and it sits on the ominous Antichrist number, 666 acres of land. Okay. Now, originally, this asylum was deemed to hold 250 patients. Now, we all know the stories with asylums. As time progresses, more people come in, more people are dropped off at the doorstep, and, people that don't want to take care of anybody get thrown into an asylum. So just keep in mind that it was originally designed for 250 patients. When mentally ill people were barely in the beginning stages of getting treatment, okay? Now, prior to that, those same people were considered insane and locked up in ordinary prisons. Now, I'm thinking to myself, why would you throw somebody who is mentally ill into a prison? Why? Why would you do that? They seek help. They need help. But then again, you stop and think about it. There was nowhere else for them to go. So they would get abused, tortured, and sexually assaulted in a prison by other inmates. And that's when they started up with the asylums. Now, these asylums in the beginning were very clean, very spotless, but as time progressed, a lot of the patients were neglected. Okay, the buildings were neglected. The patient ratio to orderly to nurse to doctor was somewhere like 50 to 100 patients per one nurse. Okay, and basically you had to take care of those people in your 8 to 12 hour shift. That's ridiculous. That's impossible. Nobody can do that. So these patients, for lack of having additional nurses and nursing staff, were left in their filth, their own fecal matter, their urine. Some would literally bite other patients, bite ears off, bite their tongue off, and a lot of patients were had their teeth pulled so they wouldn't harm anybody. Instead of helping them and hiring more nursing staff, they did the opposite. They made matters worse, in my opinion. Some of them were confined to beds. Some of them were confined to cribs. Some of them that should have been walking and talking were still in an infancy state of mind. Malnourishment. So things like that happened in a lot of these insane asylums. Now, the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is also known as the West Virginia Hospital for the Insane, and the Weston State Hospital was designed using new moral, I'm using air quotes if you can picture it, moral ideas that separated the insane from the criminal and aimed to help them. Now, my little trusty handy dandy history book that I have all these paranormal stories and haunted locations shows some pictures of Trans-Allegheny, and you got asbestos filled buildings, you have decay, you have rooms that are all stained and fecal matter smeared all over the place and stuff like that, that are just left there. Now, a lot of these asylums closed in the 80s, early 90s. That's when the government started to crack down on a lot of things, but we'll see. Now, this particular asylum was built using the Kirkbride plan, which what that means is that its hospital design could aid in the patient's recovery. The idea was that if a person was given lots of sunlight, quiet, pastoral landscapes, plenty of mental and physical activities, that their health could be stimulated. In a perfect world, I would say yes, but we're not living in a perfect world. And as the years progressed and as stuff happened, this plan, the Kirkbride plan, started to fail. Now, besides adults, Trans-Allegheny had a lot of children that were institutionalized for various reasons, which included novel reading, laziness, religious excitement, which were some of the excuses that people used to get rid of unwanted family members. Laziness. You're sending a child to an insane asylum with people that are truly insane because they're lazy. Now, this is how the people were. If you didn't hold up, your end, you were lazy or you were a fanatic of whatever the case may be, you were sent to an asylum, which in my opinion is totally fucked up. But again, now through the decades, treatment of the mentally ill patients became genuinely so and wrongly accused. Now, a lot of the insane asylums have a dark past. And when I mean dark, I mean dark. You have your electric shock therapy, supposedly to cure you. You have your hydrotherapy. Basically, it's submerging you into freezing water baths. That is supposed to cure you. I don't understand how that in Sam Hell is going to cure you, but that's what they said, it'll cure you. Now, caging uncontrollable patients, they would do lobotomies on these people. Now, the lobotomy itself became a world answer to the problem. You take a spike into the corner of the eye, wiggle it, hammer it into the skull, wiggle it, make mush of the brain, and then pull it out, and the person is left in a very unique state of mind, because you just messed up either the left or the right or both sides of the brain to cure their illness. But at some cases, you just made the matter worse, in my opinion. Now, by the 50s, the hospital was overcrowded with more than... Now, get this. Remember, this hospital, Asylum, was built for only 250 people. Now, by the time the 1950s came, so 250 people in 1864, okay? So, keep that in mind. 1950s, this hospital had, hold on, I want to make sure I'm reading this number correctly, 2,400 people crammed into rooms. You're taking a hospital that was built for 250 people and you're shoving thousands and thousands of people into those rooms. Now, in 1994, the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was closed up and abandoned. Now today, there's a monument of mistreatment of the mentally ill that was partially restored. Now, so part of the asylum has been restored to its original state because they converted it into a museum. Now, I don't understand why they would convert it to a museum. Is it because they want to teach others of the barbaric way they treated their patients? I mean, you gotta understand, if you're a little kid and your parents don't want anything to do with you, and instead of taking you to an orphanage, they take you to the lunatic asylum and they drop you off, and you're acting out because you're a little kid, and then you as part of your treatment, we're gonna take this kid and we're gonna give him a hydrotherapy. This is a little child, and I'm not pulling this out of thin air. There are a lot of cases where children were put into hydrotherapies. They were given lobotomies. They had their teeth pulled because they were biting other patients. So I'm not pulling this out of fucking air. No. This is written. There are articles on this stuff. There was also... hold on. I lost my place in my notes. Now, like I said, most of it was opened up as a museum for the general public, but the majority, I would say 95% of the asylum is closed to the public. Again, asbestos, a lot of the buildings are falling apart, you got mold and you got stuff like that, so it's really not a healthy place for anybody. But then there's stories of the place being haunted. The facility was basically understaffed and underfunded. Now, many of the patients died there. They didn't have a cemetery. They had a cemetery, but it was patient number 2547, patient 2548, patient 2549. They had no names. They had nothing on the headstone. It was just a number. Okay? And again, a lot of these patients were not insane. Family members didn't want them. So, your patient dies, you call the family or you try to communicate with the family, and the family wants nothing to do with them. So, one, they died alone. They died abused. They died tormented. For what? All of this is they died alone. So I could never understand what people thought. People hear hysterical laughing. The doors were slamming. Gurneys were literally being pushed down the corridor, and nobody would even remotely work there anymore. When they were restoring it for the museum, all this stuff was happening and nobody wanted to work there. And I don't freaking blame them. I don't fucking blame them. It's retarded. Balls of lights were floating through the hallways, full body apparitions, and a lot of visitors who visit the museum encountered a lot of this stuff, So it's crazy. It's whew. Yeah. Besides Denver, Asylum, Waverly Hills, and Allegheny, I believe those were the ones that were the worst across the board. Now we're going to stay in the same area, but we're going to hit a prison now. Moundsville Penitentiary is about 60 miles northeast of Allegheny. It is also known as the West Virginia State Penitentiary. Okay, which opened just over a decade later. So 10 years after Allegheny opened, Moundsville Penitentiary opened. Now, it operated for much of the same time, the same length, but its treatment of those confined when it's within its walls was even more brutal than that of the asylum. Okay. Now, to give you an idea of what the penitentiary looked like, it is a Gothic-style compound with its castle-like turrets and battlements. It had this huge, imposing, foreboding place, even when new. This looked like a beast from Transylvania. It's a massive beast. The cells were 5 by 7 feet, and it didn't take very long for the prison to become overcrowded. So calculate, okay, this is another one that is very fucking shocking to me, but it's rightfully haunted at the same time. Now, they would cram 2 to 4 men to share a 5 by 7 cell. Okay, 2 to 4 men in a 5 by 7. That's almost the size of a freaking cubicle. All right. Now, to compare a 5 by 7 cubicle or a 5 by 8 cubicle, you have your cubicle, you have the surface to the cubicle, and then you have 2 storage containers on each side at the ends of it. Okay. Now, you got a 5 by 7. You have to have 3 people sleep in that. 4 people sleep in that. How the hell are you going to put bunk beds in there? How are you going to sleep? So, if you can picture a cubicle, then you can picture the size of this cell that they crammed 2 to 4 people in each cell. All right. I'm sorry. I'm just frustrated. I'm getting frustrated because the system sucks across the board. But a lot of these people were mentally ill and were thrown into situations that they should have not belonged there. Now, this penitentiary, this number is going to shock you. Okay, so Allegheny, built for 250, had 1,400 people locked in there. Okay, this penitentiary was built for 800 prisoners. It had 2,500 prisoners crowded into it. Now, and there was an estimated that 998 men died there, including 36 homicides, 85 by state mandated executions at the gallows. Hold on, I'm gotta flip my notes here. I mean, stop and think about it. This shit is crazy. These motherfucking people were fucking nuts. And then in 1931, top it all off, this dude was decapitated because the hanging went wrong. So he was freaking decapitated. What a way to die. Sorry, I'm just... And they even show a picture of the penitentiary, which was in use. That penitentiary was in use until 1995, the year I graduated high school. And it's creepy looking. It's very Transylvania looking. Huge turrets, very pointy castle-like. It's just like very crazy. Okay. Now 9 out of the... Let's see. So guy was decapitated in 1931 because, you know, if you're new to the podcast community and you want to start a new podcast and you're looking for a platform that is user-friendly, that has everything you need at your fingertips, that won't set any limits, that you can earn money, then I would recommend Anchor. Now, Anchor can be used basically anywhere. You could be in your car, you can be laying on the sofa in bed, where you can edit, record and upload. You can throw in soundtracks. You can, I mean, everything is there for you. Now, I use it because, like, it's user friendly, and it is free, and I find it really easy to navigate without it being very confusing. Now, most platforms, you know, before you can even try it out, you need to sign up and pick a plan. I like Anchor because I don't have to go through any of that. So I recommend it. Now, if you really want to get into it, I recommend you going to your website, anchor.fm, and, you know, signing up. Or you can download anchor.fm from the Google Store, iTunes, and give it a try. So don't forget to go to anchor.fm, sign up, and I'll see you all in podcast community. So, I lost my track here. They say that ghosts go all the way back to the 1930s, and when guards thought they saw an inmate walking the grounds, though there was no prisoner missing. The rumors began quickly that there was a ghost and it was stuck in a repetition. It would do the same thing over and over and over again. There was banging, there was footsteps, there was voices, there was yelling, you know, all of that coming from no particular source. The Sugar Shack has been known to be the most haunted area in the penitentiary. That's where a lot of the prisoners would go for recreation, and that's where they would gamble and fight. Now, there are cold spots have been reported in the room. Voices have been heard whispering and even arguing. There was one tour guide who reported having been grabbed by the arm while he was down there. An inmate once saw a specter of a man hanging in his cell on the first night there. He had no way of knowing it, but a former resident of the cell had indeed hung himself there. So you have a lot of things going on in this particular prison. Now, a lot of the prison, to give you an idea, because my beautiful handy dandy history book here shows a cell block, and I guess suicide was a big thing, and the cells had fencing on top. So I guess every level had its own fencing on top. So if a prisoner was to, try to commit suicide, he wouldn't fall all the way to the bottom. He would land on the fence, I guess, to kind of like break the fall. I know that sounds horribly wrong, but it's quite unique in a sense. Now, there's been known of a shadow man. That there are shadow men in different locations of the prison. The shower cages, the chapel, the North Wagon Gate, also known as the former gallows, and of course the Sugar Shack. Our next penitentiary is going to be a very interesting location, because this penitentiary is in Philadelphia, and it's called Eastern State Penitentiary. Opened in 1829, and it was the first of its kind in the world. Intended on focusing the physical punishment and torture, this prison wanted prisoners to reflect on what they'd done. It was believed that this remorse would aid in rehabilitation. The cells themselves had toilets, running water, and heat at a time even when the White House had nothing of sort. Now, each cell also had a private outdoor area with skylights, and so they can go out there, take a look at the sky and the sunshine from the beautiful heaven and stuff like that. Now, the prisoners were also strictly isolated to the point of wearing hoods when they were outside of their cells. So on top of you're confined to your cell block, to your cell, you're wearing hoods where you can't even see the person when you're out. Dude, that's like fucking playing with some crazy mind shit there. Now, this solitary confinement setup was meant to leave wrongdoers alone with their thoughts so they can repent and heal. Well, so, Eastern State was the type of penitentiary that loved to leave its patients, Jesus Christ, loved to leave its prisoners in isolation. Now, Eastern State Penitentiary evolved into a common prison where prisoners worked, interacted, and were disciplined. more and more cell blocks were added, and solitary confinement was moved to a windowless basement with no light and no plumbing, or as it's known as the hole. This is where it gets, like, these people, I don't know what's wrong with these people. Now, guards would submerge prisoners in water and then literally hung them out to dry on the outside wall. So imagine in the winter months, you got submerged in freaking cold water, then you were hung outside to dry. You're soaking wet, and it's fucking cold. 32 degrees outside, below zero, in your 20s, and you're freezing your ass off. Wow. This is ridiculous because they would have ice on them. Like, what is wrong with these people? Now, iron bands bound the inmates' hands behind their back, connected to a collar that went around their tongue so that when the person moved, their tongue would rip out and bleed. What kind of shit is this? Oh my god, this is like fucking mad crazy shit. What kind of bullshit is this? And the layout of Eastern State Penitentiary, there's a main hub, and then there's like offshoots, tunnels that lead to different blocks. Eastern State was closed in 1971 with over, I am like totally shocked in this number, over 70,000 people have done their time there. And it's become known as one of the most haunted places in America. Stories of strange experience, including both inmates and guards, go back as far as the 1940s. There are countless reports of voices shouting, whispering, and laughing. Shadows cast from nowhere race along the walls. A ghostly guard has been seen keeping watch on one of the towers. Gary Johnson, a locksmith who has long worked at restoring the prison, has seen contorted faces and been beckoned by an apparition. Once, when he was working on opening a cell block in 4, he was overcome by a force so fierce that he couldn't move. He felt the wave of negative energy crash out of the cell and then tried to lure her in. Oh my god. I don't know which is worst. Allegheny, Moundsville, or Eastern State. All 3 of these locations are very creepy. Just by looking at the pictures, very, very creepy. And on top of it all, each location is super haunted. So I most definitely give this location, an 8. No, I give Allegheny a 10. I give Moundsville an 8. I give Eastern State a 10. So these are all bucket list locations where I plan to go visit, and I will go visit. So yes, that's where I'm going to go. Now, feedback, ideas, stories, I would love to know. I'd also want to hear your thoughts on these 3 locations and see what you think. Would you visit Allegheny Lunatic Asylum? Would you go to Moundsville Penitentiary? Or would you go to Eastern State Pen? I would love to know. Leave me a comment, and I will respond. Or you can email me directly at whattheparanormal77@gmail.com. Thanks. Stay safe and keep it ghosting. Have you ever wanted a podcast that is multifaceted? That your hosts are cool and down to earth. You know, they talk about everything under the sun, including the kitchen sink, but they also are real. You know, well, let me tell you about Table Muscles. Now, Rob and Wolf are co-hosts, and Rob is a good friend of mine. They have a really cool podcast that, like I said, covers everything. You know, they do conspiracy theories, they do shout outs, they support an organization or an awareness for the month. If you are going through a rough time, you know, they make themselves available. You know, you can hit them up with a direct message on Insta, their Facebook page. I don't know if they have a Twitter yet. But they're a really cool podcast. Two really down-to-earth guys that keep it real. You know, they're there for you. They talk about a lot of different things. So their podcast has a little bit of everything. Make sure you go check them out. It's Table Muscles. They're on every platform. They're on social media. Let them know that Ms. Hyde from What the Paranormal sent you. And go show them some love and support. They're fairly new, but, you know, let's show our support. And they have a little bit of everything, so, you know, they may have topics that you really enjoy. So go take a listen and see what they have. Don't forget, they're called Table Muscles, and they're on social media, and they are on all the podcast platforms. And don't forget to tell them that Miss Hyde from What the Paranormal sent you over. Hey folks, thank you for joining us tonight, and make sure you like, subscribe, and follow on all our social medias. We are on a lot of platforms. We also have a new number where you can text and leave us your ghost story, or you can leave us a voice message telling us about your ghost story, and we will incorporate that into an episode. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, let us know. You can email us directly at whattheparanormal77@gmail.com, or you can send us a message through our social media. With that being said, you'll have a good evening, good day, good night, and we will see you on the next episode. Don't forget to keep it ghosting.